ordered the metaphysician to appear, and so, in several minutes, a tall, emaciated fellow wearing an orange turn-to-glue and sprout-feathers prison jumpsuit stood before him. "Tell me, metaphysician, wise man of faster-than-light technologies, I have secured a second-generation faster-than-light tech unit and wish to know its principles of operation." Honorable Aristarch, may I review the 4 fundamental types of known faster-than-light technologies? "You may. Proceed." Aristarch Khan, FTL-1 tech is what you have used so far, as I know already. Vast quantities of mass and energy of space-time are forced together with tremendous concatenated power such that fault lines across space-time are made to exist, acting as vast one-dimensional strings. With right design, the vacant sections of space-time are bent and warped along the string lines, permitting a space-time disequilibrium that allows a snapback into place with a slingshot-like whipsaw of an acute object placed correctly to another sector of space-time. Theorists have regarded it as extremely materially wasteful and costly. Yes, metaphysician, Zellery called it very dirty and loved it. FTL Tech 2 that you may say you have acquired may be explained with the idea of Einstein's two-dimensional rubber sheet of space-time with mass set upon it, forcing it to sink a little whenever mass is concentrated under gravity. If the space-time sheet is considered to have infinite elastic properties, or at least elastic until light speed, then it is possible to consider stretching space-time with a focal point of pressure, such as a blended knitting needle. Given sufficient focused pressure, the rubber sheet may allow itself to be stretched away perpendicularly from the basic flat rubber sheet. And if the force is made to curve, the extruding cylinder rubber could be forced to stretch so far as to bend around a touch of far end of the sheet. At that point where the extruded sheet reaches and touches the rubber sheet at a distant location, the traveler is allowed to rupture and re-enter space-time in some distant place and time, while the extruding rubber cylinder returns very quickly back to its original position and place. The traveler in an FTL-2 tech unit would not seem to himself to have moved anywhere at all. He would just be in a new space-time locale. What about the properties Einstein described in general relativity about mass increasing infinitely as the traveler approaches the speed of light, and that time slows as when there's light speed? Consider again the rubber sheet, if you will, Aristarch Khan. An ordinary mass vehicle pressing upon it encounters resistance. As it increases speed, Newton's principle of an equal and opposite force in opposition to any action applies. The more the speed increases, the more resistance and apparent mass increases on the accelerating vehicle. Even so, while the vehicle is pressing toward the speed of light, space is stretched, the vehicle embedded within it too, while the overall quantity of space-time remains the same. 1 inch unit time is stretched to the length of 10 units while remaining 1 unit. Existing within that accelerated unit allows more subjectively to be done than for someone living in an unaccelerated stationary unit of unstretched space-time. Then pushing space-time itself to expand rather than a vessel pressing against it is a way to avoid increasing mass infinitely? Yes, Aristarch. FTL-3 is simple enough too. One in theory exploits hidden smaller dimensions that traverse the larger dimensions to be shortcut. The space-time between the 3 large space dimensions, one of time, I don't know of anyone that has an FTL-3 technology. What is a level 4 technology, metaphysician? Aristarch, it is only understood partly in theory to me. It is said to involve cutting out a section of space-time from the Higgs field, including a sector of the Higgs field, creating a null space devoid of any tie to normal space-time and its dimensions and mass and energy, bypassing and short-circuiting gravity flowing through it to make every force go around it, then floating the attached mass and energy to another place in space-time before reattaching it. What becomes of the displaced mass in the receiving space-time when the Gauss field contents of null space return to the misty? Your guess would be as good as mine, Aristarch. It could be quite a dangerous experiment to discover what the answer is. For your responses, I shall spare you torture before you return to the dungeon. Two lever bots placed the prisoner under arm and floated him away into the distance. Aristarch Khan's brow furrowed with thought, and he spun his model of the Silky Way before him, delighted with millions of